Hey everyone, I'm Eric from Lonesome Reader. I thought I'd make a quick reading wrap-up video today while I'm having my breakfast. I'm eating avocado on toast, smashed avocado on toast. And I know this is like the ultimate like hipster sort of trendy breakfast now, but there's a reason why it's so popular, because it's really, really good. But I'm not going to eat it on film because that is just gross. But what's particularly good about this avocado on toast is I used Nigella Lawson's recipe from her book Simply Nigella. And what she does is chop up some dill and grate some fresh ginger and some chili flakes and lime juice, mixes that in with smashed avocado and some sea salt on sourdough toast. It is so good. I feel like my reading wrap-up videos have been like a bit out of whack recently because I've been reading so many books for prizes that I've made other videos talking about those books, and so I don't want to make a reading wrap-up video talking about the same books. But I have been doing a lot of reading, so I've been reading the books for the British Book Awards and then trying and failing to read all of the books longlisted for the Bailey's Women's Prize for Fiction before the shortlist was announced. If you want to hear me and Anna James talking about all of these books, I'll put a link up. I did read most of them, but not all of them. But here is the Bailey's Prize shortlist. And it is a really exciting, interesting list. I'm still only partway through reading The Sport of Kins and really enjoying it. It's a really surprising and strange novel, and I've not read First Love yet. I'm really curious about reading First Love after Anna was so critical about it in our video. We went to the announcement for the Bailey's Prize shortlist, and I was standing next to Anna when the announcement was made. And it was so funny. You should have seen Anna's face when they announced that First Love was on the list. It was like somebody had given her an earwax jelly bean to eat. She was just... Before I move on from the long list to the short list, I thought I would talk just a little bit more about two of the novels on the long list that didn't make it to the short list, and which I didn't get to talk about as fully as I wanted to in that other video. And I think it'll be a fun thing to do, just to pick out a few quotes from the books that I think are really interesting. First, The Woman Next Door by Yewande Omotoso. And this isn't a book that I would normally pick out because, look, it's like quite feminine and makes it look quite like chick lit. And I don't know if you can figure out, but I couldn't figure out for the longest time what this is on the cover. I thought, like, is it some sort of like garment or like a girdle or something with straps? And I had to have my boyfriend point it out to me that these are binoculars. Which makes sense. It's a story about two old women that live next door to each other and they hate each other, and one of the women has binoculars that she spies on people with. So I thought this was an interesting and fun novel, but not a spectacular read. It's set in South Africa. It touches on some darker issues about racism and ageism, but it doesn't go too deeply into these subjects. However, there's a line that I really liked. There's this one character, Marion, who has some quite deep-seated racist ideas, and she can be quite an unlikable and manipulative character. And there's this line about her other neighbors called the Van Streekers, where she writes, "Because she didn't like them, Marion had made them her friends. Attending all their soirees, noticed that behind the money, their marriage was a sham, and she took comfort in this." And I just like the biting, cutting way that shows about how like some of our friendships are really made up out of like jealousy and wanting to see the other person fail, which is sort of tragic and funny all at the same time. Then there's Heather O'Neill's The Lonely Hearts Hotel, which tells the story of two orphan children in the early 1900s in Montreal growing to adulthood and living through the Depression. But it's told in a really fairy tale like way. And it's a book where so many interesting quotes and ideas were leaping out at me from the page as I was reading it. But I mean, overall, I felt really conflicted about the book. But it has so many interesting, stimulating ideas, and it's done really creatively. Here's a couple of quotes that I think are really powerful. She writes, "Perhaps the most dangerous people in the world are the ones who believe in right and wrong, but what they ascribe to right and wrong is completely insane. They are bad with a conviction that they are good. It is that idea that is the impetus behind evil." And I think that speaks so powerfully about our times now, about people in power who believe themselves to be absolutely right when really things are much muddier, much more complicated than they want to portray. Because if they allow those ambiguities in, it's going to lessen the impact of their power. And she shows in this novel, in a very striking way, authority figures who are so convinced of their rightness when really they are enacting horrible wrongs on the people that they're supposed to care for and look after. There's a lot in this novel about child abuse and also the abuse of women. And another interesting line is when she writes, "Women were still strange and inscrutable creatures. Men didn't understand them, and women didn't understand themselves either. It was always a performance of some sort." And this is one of the things that really excited me about the book, the way of portraying gender and identity as a sort of performance. And that translates into the story where both the orphans, Perrault and Rose, are performers. Perrault is a great natural talented pianist, and Rose becomes really interested in performance in the circus and clowns in particular, and she goes to see all these clown shows, which aren't entertainment so much as a sort of performance modern art. But it's also one of the things that really bothered me about the novel, in that I really dislike it in fiction when there's a portrayal of an art form like painting or an acting performance or a film, and there's an audience for that art form who are so wowed by it that they are just completely in awe. I think that happens so rarely in real life, where people just become enamored and transformed by a work of art. I mean, it does happen sometimes, but in this novel it happens again and again. People are wowed by their performances, and it's like the best thing that they've ever seen. Which, in hindsight, that's quite a minor thing to pick about the novel, but it is something that sort of bothered me. I do think, though, that it is such strong, intelligent writing. So, onto this book of short stories published by Picador called Swimmer Among the Stars by Kanishk Tharoor. This is his debut book, and it is such wild, imaginative writing. These stories really range in time from soldiers fighting in ancient BC to a future time when diplomats from various failing nations are staying in a luxury spaceship hovering over Earth trying to figure out how to solve Earth's problems while the countries continue to break down. So the subjects are really wide-ranging, but they strangely cohere in a way. Like there's a lot about migration in them, there's a lot about the meaning of culture, what defines us as a culture, as a country, about nationality. And a lot of them have a fable-like feel, where there's stories within stories. And there's a lot in it about language. One of the stories, the title story, Swimmer Among the Stars, is about these people who go to interview a woman who is the last speaker of her native language, and they're trying to record that language for posterity. And there is so much in it about how language is formed and the meaning of words. And then there's a whole series of short vignettes within this longer story called The Mirrors of Iskandar, which are retellings of stories from Arabic literature about Alexander the Great, or Iskandar as he's known in Arabic tradition, which I had no idea that in Arabic literature there was this whole other tradition of Alexander the Great being written about as a great Arabic hero. But these are really imaginative and fun retellings, including one called A Spell on the Conqueror's Penis. Some other stories are set in more contemporary times, like there's one story that references 9/11, and there's a really lovely story called The Fall of an Eyelash. Overall, it's a really imaginative book with a philosophical bent, so I'd really recommend this if you're in the mood for some short stories. And finally, I read this very powerful short novel called One of the Boys by another debut writer called Daniel Magariel, and this is published by Granta Books. I talked about it a bit in my recent book haul video, which I'll link up. And it has a story which starts so powerfully, where it's told from the perspective of this boy, and at the start of the novel, the father is engineering a way for him to get custody of this boy over his mother, and so they plot this really horrible scheme. The father, the boy, and his older brother move to New Mexico, where they start up a new life for themselves, but the father is plagued with addiction. So it's about the heartbreaking struggle of these two boys living under this domineering father. And the book gives such an interesting perspective on masculinity and what it means to be a man, what it means to be a collective of a group of men. I thought it was such a moving novel, so I'd highly recommend it. So that's what I've been reading, and that's what I've been eating for breakfast. I'm now like suddenly paranoid because I've been eating this toast in between talking about books that I have avocado in my teeth, so I'm gonna go check that. But let me know what you've been reading if you're interested in reading any of these books, and also let me know what you've been eating for breakfast. I'll talk to you soon. Thanks for watching and happy reading.